Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live international webinar. There is a famous quote: education is the passport to the future. Tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. And that is quite true, isn't it? A proper education is something that tends to a proper future. And to co up with a proper level of education, we need information on whatever we are facing in and out from every possible way. And today's event will provide you with lots of information on this regard. It is an honor itself to greet you all to this event. It is my privilege to welcome our chief guests, eminent speakers, delegates, and participants on today's webinar. Rajendranath College of Polytechnic is going to host this live international webinar, which is based on Education Engineering Towards Industry 4.0. We are delighted and also honored to be able to conduct this event and to make the acquaintance of all you here at RCP. Rajendranath College of Polytechnic is a premier technical educational institute in West Bengal, and it was established by Sri Jayanta Kumar Chakraborty, the founder president of Rajendranath Education and Welfare Trust. RCP was established with the endeavor of providing quality education on technological aspects. We are providing diploma engineering courses in the field of electrical, mechanical, civil, and also in computer science and technology. RCP persistently seeks and adopts inventive methods to improve the quality of higher education on a consistent basis. This institution has been functioning since 2012. It is approved by the All India Council of Technical Education under the Ministry of MHRD and affiliated by West Bengal State Council of Technical and Vocational Education and Skill Development. Let me first acknowledge the presence of some of our eminent guests. Our Honorable Chairman, Chief Patron of today's event, Sri Jayanta Kumar Chakraborty, our respected Director Technical, Patron of this international webinar, Sri Kajol Das, and our Honorable CEO, Sri Madan Sarkar, also our beloved Principal, the convener of today's event, Professor Tanmoy Sinha, and a very special person, the keynote speaker of today's event, Professor Dr. Vikas Kumar, who is the Director of Research and Professor of Operations and Supply Chain Management at Bristol Business School, University of the West England, UK. Well, first of all, we will have our traditional auspicious lamp lighting ceremony. We are all familiar with beginnings. They all can be small steps, but its impact can be experienced in giant leaps. So, I humbly request our principal, Professor Tanmoy Sinha, to kindly make a new beginning through illuminating the traditional lighting of lamps. I also request humbly our respected CEO of Rajendranath College of Polytechnic, Sri Madan Sarkar, our HOD of Humanities of Basic Science and Humanities of Basic Science, Dr. Somnath Ghotok, to kindly assist to start a new beginning. Sir, we are waiting. Kindly start the program by lighting the lamps. It is a symbolic act of the light that shines within all our hearts. We pray for our blessings with all humanity. So, let's start the program now. I would like to call upon stage Sri Madan Sarkar, CEO of Rajendranath College of Polytechnic, to give a briefing on today's event. Sir, I humbly request you to kindly come up here to please give a briefing on today's event.
যে ওই যে ঠিক করে সেট হয়েছে দিলেন লিঙ্কটা দিলেন so we can start. Good morning, Professor Tanmoy Sinha, our principal, Rajendranath College of Polytechnic, and also convener of this webinar. And good morning, Dr. Somnath Ghotok, who is our head basic science department, and also good morning to our other faculties and Oindila Moitro, who is anchoring this session. Today we have been compelled to go for webinar because as per our plan in the month of March, when we plan to go for international conference with Dr. Vikas Kumar from England and Dr. Pastor from Philippines. But because of outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, we have been forced to divert or defer the international conference, and now we have planned to hold webinar seminar. And today we have one speaker, the eminent speaker, only one speaker, Dr. Vikas Kumar. And few days back, we have already another webinar with Professor Dr. Pastor, who is from Philippines, that has been done. That webinar was done. And now today we have with us Dr. Vikas Kumar. I would just introduce him with a very short, brief profile. Professor Vikas Kumar is a Director of Research and Professor of Operation and Supply Chain Management of Bristol Business School, University of the West of England, UK. Professor Kumar works very closely with industries and has generated research funding in the excess of $1 million from various research agencies such as Innovate UK, EPSRC, British Council, British Academy, Newton Fund, and Science Foundation of Ireland. He is currently working on two research projects funded by British Academy or Newton Fund and Royal Academy of Engineering, and that are focused on developing countries, Indonesia and Turkey. His research projects are in collaboration with the researchers from a number of UK universities, as well as researchers from Brazil, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Costa Rica, and Turkey. Professor Kumar's current research focus is on sustainable supply chain management and supply chain 4.0. His other research interests include supply chain improvement, short focus, short food supply chains, green modeling, innovation in SMEs, operation strategy, and service supply chains. Area of expertise: sustainable supply chain management, food supply chains, industry 4.0, digital supply chain management, structural equation modeling, service operation management, short food supply chains, operational access. So he is very much expert in this subject. That is why I would not touch upon the main topic, the engineering education towards industry 4.0. Where already we are aware of the fate, we are aware of the pathetic condition of the Indian industry because of outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. Our industry have suffered a lot, making many lakhs homeless and many lakhs jobless. There is no employment opportunity for the last 7 months, and we have been suffering for this COVID-19 pandemic. That is why today, on this webinar, we also pray before God so that we can come to our normal life, because we have seen that we have introduced online classes, but many thousands of the students are from poor family. They don't possess any smartphone or laptop or any data service but connectivity with the internet. So that is why only 20 to 25% students could attend only online classes, and they are out of the classes. So we sincerely pray before God to show that the previous situation, the normal situation comes back very soon. And also, we are well aware that the Indian government has already is well set to implement a new national education policy from the next year. And we are also aware that in this new education policy, national education policy, there will be a lot of changes, even many mergers of many courses. And what I've heard, then class 9, 10, 11, 12, that will be merged into one class. So that is why we are looking forward also to the next national education policy. And we, the RCP collective or Rajendranath Education Welfare Collective, we have planned to go for a seminar, national seminar on national education policy. Lot of debates will be going. We are well aware that whenever the government has introduced this national education policy, there is a lot of debates, lot of controversies, and we want to hear or listen every points, even the every points from the every corner, because the educationist experts, they will be sharing with their views whether this national education policy will be helpful to us or not. I will not take much time, and I would welcome Dr. Vikas Kumar to be us with us, and he will deliver his speech after our principal, Dr. After our principal Professor Tanmay Sinha's speech. Dr. Vikas Kumar will come and deliver his speech. Please. Thank you all. Hmm.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful speech. Now, I consider it a great honor to welcome our patron, Technical Director of Rajendranath College of Polytechnic, Sri Kajol Dash, to please give your valedictory speech.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me congratulate Principal RCP and CEO of Rajendranath Group of Education for organizing such an apt webinar today. You know, the entire world is changing and it is becoming more and more dynamic due to the present COVID situation. We all know that Rajendranath Group of Education is putting all their effort not only to improve the education level of the students, but also to improve the quality of the society, and they are always keeping a pace with the present world trend and doing accordingly, organizing all kind of programs and looking at the NCP, as already CEO has mentioned, that looking at the NCPs, all NPAs, whatever new directions are coming, all are being followed by Rajendranath Group of Engineering. So let me congratulate once again to them. You know, the world is now changing at a fast pace and we are all dependent on the digital world. The world is transforming very fast rate on the digital world, and on the automation digital world is the only solution in today's world, be it education, be it industry, or whatever may be. To sustain in the world changing world, we have to depend on this, especially the we are facing, all the industries are facing now a acute competition, and to sustain their cutting edge they have to be looking, they are looking wildly for a beneficial process. The world is getting connected to a digital world where the oceans of informations are being handled. Let us say that, let us take the example of RCP only, the Rajendranath Group of Education. If we adopt a kind of industry 4.0 model here in RCP, we'll find there are oceans of informations are being there and which are not noticed properly by all of us. If they are noticed, if they are utilized in time, and if they are being communicated in time, all the advantages will come to the all stakeholders, and particularly to the owners, to the students, everyone. A smart approach to handle the industries, basically they are doing a quick screening process of the entire data, and they are screening it, they are taking out the useful data, and they are being utilized for improving the efficiency of the industry. What is the ultimate objective of any industry? The ultimate objective of the any industry, be it we are also in a working in an industrial model, though we are in an education field, but we are also in an industrial model. Ultimate objective is to improve the efficiency of our working, to improve the bottom line, that is the profit, to improve EBITDA, to improve the supply chain processes which will be delivered, I hope will be delivered by the right experts. And this webinar will definitely sensitize all the students who are attending the today's program and who are the future of our country, and who will be prepared to know what is industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 is an invisible industry. The revolution has come to collect and to deal with the entire data, entire ocean of data. It includes cyber physical system, the industrial internet of things, cloud computing, etc. and etc. We'll come to know. And the basic features, as you know, there are three basic features are there. One is sensorizing. Sensorizing means all up-to-date sensors are being installed at every place so that correct data are coming. and big data cloud computing, so that the data are being properly stored. For that, industry does not should not look for a big data center or big servers where they will keep all these data. They are being fed in the cloud. The efficiency for the industries will be to map all the business process, to map all the assets, to map and monitor the entire preventive maintenance, to map monitoring the safety aspects of the organization, to map the project monitoring, etc., etc. So a lot of advantages are there, and ultimately the analytics and optimizations will take place. My dear friends, this is a right time to look into the industry 4.0, to understand it and to utilize it in the days to come, and it will be benefited everywhere, at every place, not only industry. It will be benefited in the educational society where we are working. It will be benefited for all of us. With this, I thanks once again for giving me the opportunity to speak before you. Thank you. Yes, Indrila, you can move forward in the today's session and further derivations.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valedictory speech. Now, I would like to request our convener, our respected principal of Rajendranath College of Polytechnic, Professor Tanmoy Sinha, to please convey your message.
Good afternoon. It is a great honor for me to introduce and welcome our honored speaker, Professor Dr. Vikas Kumar Sir, Honorable Chairman Sir, CEO Sir, Director Sir, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of the webinar is Engineering Education towards Industry 4.0. Today we are about 100 participants, industrial experts, professionals joining in the international webinar, and the participants came together here to discuss on the topic Engineering Education towards Industry 4.0. In this conjunction, I would like to share my thoughts regarding the webinar. The main goal of the fourth industrial evolution is to achieve a deeper connection between the physical and cybernetic world, mainly in the industrial sector, and thus streamline all manufacturing. India has to move from manufacturing outfit to of industry 1.0 and 2.0 to industry 4.0 and beyond. India is associated with departments of heavy industries, is raising awareness of the fourth industrial revolution to drive Indian manufacturing to a smart and intelligent manufacturing hub. Today, we are privileged to have an opportunity to listen in the engineering education towards Industry 4.0 by Vikas Kumar Sir this afternoon. On behalf of all gathered here, I welcome you, sir, to literary afternoon to the international webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, let's focus on today's event, which is Engineering Education towards Industry 4.0. This live event will focus on the regard and can be considered as a first step in developing a roadmap for engineering education to adopt Industry 4.0 vision at the national level. On this aspect, we feel very proud to announce the name of that very special person who is currently researching on this currently theme. Please join me in welcoming Professor Dr. Vikas Kumar, the Director of Research and Professor of Operations and Supply Chain Management at Bristol Business School, University of the West England, UK. Professor Kumar works very closely with industries, and we find ourselves fortunate enough to gather knowledge from him. Sir, the screen is all yours.
Thank you very much. And first of all, good afternoon to everyone. I would like to thank Madan for the kind introduction, Sri Kajal Das, the Director of Technical Education, Professor Tanmay Singh, and the Principal, and certainly to the Rajendranath Group of institution for inviting me for this event. And I hope that the talk will be interesting. I'm trying my best to keep my talk within an hour, that of time that I've got, and towards the end we will have plenty of time for any questioning. So let me first put my slides here just to make sure everything works perfectly. Okay. Can you see my screen? Can anybody just confirm that you can see everything? Can you please confirm if you can see my screen? Let me see. Okay, can you all see my screen? Still you can't see anything? Okay. I think you should be able to see my screen now, isn't it?
Hello?
Yes.
Are you able to hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, but we are not getting anything on the screen, sir.
Because I could see myself and I can see two parallel windows. I'm not sure why it is not appearing. Is it there?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm not sure that it's saying that it's sharing.
There will be a sharing option.
Yes, I've clicked that and I've shared my screen. I could see both windows, but maybe there is a way to. Okay, if I stop this sharing.
We can do one thing, sir. Like, if you could, send the presentation to us, we can
Okay,
also put it in the screen.
okay, that's fine. So I'm going to send you the presentation now.
Yeah, sure. You have the mail ID or so
Yes,
you're having the mail ID.
I will email to Principal Sir. I think I've got his ID.
Okay.
And
He's going to send the mail to Principal Sir's ID. Principal Sir's ID. He's going to send the presentation in your ID.
yeah, just give me 2 seconds. Yes, I've just emailed him. Okay. But I'm going to try one more time just in case if it works. Okay, can you see now? Are you able to see now?
Okay, we are sharing it.
Okay, that's fine.
No, sir.
I think some technical.
No, sir, we have not been able to see, sir. We got your
Okay,
mail, the presentation.
okay,
Okay,
then
wait, sir, wait.
I will stop sharing
Yeah,
then. Yeah. Okay.
we got to see the pop-up of the video.
Okay, it's not there yet. It's blank, but I think maybe it's taking a bit more time. I can't see anything yet. Yeah. Yes, I can see now.
So please, sir, proceed, sir.
Okay,
It's all
that's.
yours.
How can I move the slides? You have to do it them from there, right?
Sorry, sir, I didn't get you.
Like how do I change the slides? I have to tell you
Sir,
to
you
change.
have to tell us that whenever you will require to change the slide, you need to tell us, sir. We will do it accordingly.
Okay, okay. That's fine. I think it will take maybe extra minutes, but that's okay. Um,
Okay.
Sorry for this technical glitch. I think we are just there now, and thank you very much for your patience. As you know that I'm going to talk today about the Engineering Education 4.0, and just would like to to give you my quick introduction, and then we will talk about the general context because certainly all the the people who actually were speaking here in the beginning, and Madan, Dr. Sri Kajal Das, the principal said, everybody also gave reference to the COVID-19. So I thought to give you some idea in terms of what is the current status of COVID-19 around the globe and how it is actually impacting the education system. And then we will move on to talk in terms of the role of the technology in that sense. So if you can change the slide to the first one. Okay. Can you next slide, please? Next slide, please. Can you change to the next slide? Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. So just to give you a quick overview, because we are talking here in the sense of engineering education, and I just wanted to highlight that I'm also an engineer, and I did my engineering in metallurgy and materials science engineering from National Institute of Foundry and Force Technology in India, in Ranchi. And my PhD was very much very much in the management science domain from University of Exeter. And then actually I've worked in Hong Kong, I worked in Ireland before moving to UK. In terms of what you see the pictures here, I think slides have been changed fairly quickly. But if you go one slide back, I think it just gives you an overview of Bristol, where I'm currently based in. And it's actually a very culturally rich city, which is quite a good modern mix of the modern and the old traditions down here. And this is quite close to London, about 2 hours drive from there. And I think it's a good hub where actually the industries and the universities work quite closely. And our university, in fact, are very proud of working very closely with the industries because we want to make a big impact through our research. The next slide that you're actually seeing at the moment is actually a small research group that I'm currently co-leading with one of my colleagues, Professor Wendy Phillips. And as you can see, we have got expertise in a range of different areas. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I believe there's perhaps a bit of a delay in terms of what I see on my screen. Can you please change the slide to the COVID context? Oh, thank you. Before I said, I begin my actual talk on Industry 4.0 and how it's actually impacting the engineering education or education sector in general, I just wanted to give you a brief overview in terms of how this COVID-19 is having a significant impact on the education around the globe. There was stats, I think, that you can see on the screen, about 75 million, for example, children and youth globally actually is being impacted. And that's not because of the COVID. That's everything else beyond COVID, like armed conflicts in many countries, primarily in Africa, forced displacements, climate change, and other kind of disasters. But because of this COVID-19, this has further made the situation really worse. The dropout rates across the globe are actually quite alarming, and it's subjected to increase. Many countries like India, for example, we are already seeing that we're still struggling with this COVID-19. Here in the UK, we had one peak, but we are now nearing towards the second wave of this pandemic. Already tighter restrictions are in place, but so far the schools are operating, but very likely that they might have to be also closed because of the increasing number of cases. Now, if you look at the higher education sector as well, more than 220 million students, which is actually about 13% of the total students affected globally because of this COVID. So that actually shows the significant impact this pandemic is having on the education sector. If you change to the next slide, can you move on to this slide? Can you please change the slide to general assessment, please? Which is slide number 7. Yeah, the next one, please. Yeah, thank you. And there was a survey which was done by some of the Australian universities just to look at the impact of this pandemic on the education sector. And you can see that the pandemic has really affected all across the globe. The graph on the left-hand side is basically showing the number of institutions in different regions of the globe who were actually being surveyed. But the interesting point here is in terms of the impact that this is having. So you could see nearly about 59% of the institution kind of reported that they all had some sort of disruptions and they had to stop the institutions completely. Now, if you look at the next slide, which perhaps again gives you a little bit more, I would say, in-depth information in terms of the impact of this COVID and how the institutions are transitioning. So can you change this to the next slide, please? So how has COVID affected your teaching and learning? Very few would say yes, not affected, perhaps because disease was not spreading in those areas when the survey was conducted. But majority of them had challenges in terms of running the day-to-day normal way of functioning. And you could see nearly about 67% of the institutions had to actually replace their face-to-face teaching with some sort of distance learning. And that's exactly still being followed, at least here in the UK. And I think that's also the same case in India, where now we are slowly relying more on the technology to facilitate the teaching activities. So this brings very nicely to the next slide, which talks about what is this Industry 4.0. I think the speakers in this morning, have already given you some indication what that, the Industry 4.0 is. So if you can change to the next slide, please. So you can see that, basically there are 4 phases. We started from Industry 1.0 to 4.0. But it's quite important to see how this Industry 4.0 has actually evolved since the 18th century. And you could see the first industrial revolution. I think that was very much was focused on moving more from the manual labor performed by people and with the support of animals during the past times, to more optimized form of labor performed through the use of water and the steam powered engines and some machine tools. Then we moved on slowly to the industry 2.0, were actually with the introduction of the electricity, which certainly enabled manufacturers to increase the efficiency, to make the factory machinery more mobile. And it was this phase where actually we started looking at the mass production concepts like assembly line to improve and boost the productivity. And then slowly we moved in around 1950s, to be honest, in Industry 3.0, where actually manufacturers started to incorporate more electronics and eventually computers and technology into their factories. So this was the period actually when manufacturers began experiencing a shift to put less emphasis on analog and mechanical technology and more on the digital and the automation software. So that finally leads to 2011, when actually this term Industry 4.0 was actually coined in Germany, where actually there's a whole emphasis is on the digital technologies and how we can harness the power of these technologies in every field that we would like to. And I think we already heard about Internet of Things, accessing the real-time data. We talk about the cyber physical system, and it actually helps people and the machines to connect each other, and that actually facilitates lots of ways of doing things very differently. So the next slide that actually you are seeing on your screen is actually telling you like the pace of this transition from the manual, or I would say, to more toward the digital. So if you talk about nearly 14 years ago in 2006, whether we have seen iPhones, iPad, Kindle, Airbnb, Android, WhatsApp, that we actually all use quite commonly between us. No, it didn't exist at that point of time. Next slide, please. And the next slide gives you basically again an idea in terms of how many years, in fact, it took to reach about 50 to 100 million users. And you could see, it's quite interesting to see telephones, for example. It took nearly 50 years to get to that number. And if you talk about some of the popular games, which I believe many of you might be playing, Pokemon Go, it nearly took just 19 days to be there to just 50 million users. And there's fantastic examples, whether you talk about WhatsApp, whether you talk about Facebook, iTunes, everything, the rate of transformation has been, incredible, to be honest. So in a way, it is good. Yes, technology is actually taking a nice place in our daily lives fairly quickly, but it does also brings lots of challenges in terms of the skill set. So if we move on to the next slide, please. The next slide gives you a kind of an overview in terms of the building blocks that this Industry 4.0 is based on. It's basically all these disruptive technologies. The slide shows you about 9 different technologies, from advanced robotics to additive manufacturing. You talk about augmented reality, simulation, IoT, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and so on. And we hear quite a lot about the artificial intelligence, for example. We hear quite a lot about the 3D printing. So these are the different building blocks, which actually is slowly changing the way we are actually doing things in every field. Now, it is quite important to really understand how these technologies are now going to influence, particularly if we talk about the education. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So this new transformation towards the digital world is very much now has compelled us to think more about how technology is going to kind of change the education. And people have in fact started coining this term, talking it as an education 4.0, where actually is very much about harnessing the technologies of this Industry 4.0, but also thinking about developing the capabilities and skill set which is actually needed to meet the requirements of the industry. So when we're talking about in the engineering education sense, we have been learning things which has been designed quite a few years ago. Now, whether our education system, whether the skill set that actually is needed to do well in this new world or in this new digital world, do we really have that? What we can do to really enhance the the learning capabilities of the student, what we can really offer them in terms of the skills and develop those capabilities which will enable them to really successfully work in this new digital world. And this is the reason why we started thinking about the Education 4.0. So how this technology is influencing the way we deliver things, how this technology needs what sort of skills and capabilities to really perform well in those industries or in that environment. So that is something I think we are going to explore a little bit today in our talk. Next slide, please. So before we begin discussing those important aspects, and I just wanted to give you a quick overview in terms of where some of the countries are in terms of the changing education trend. Can you please change to the next slide? So in the report, was published by the Royal Academy of Engineering in the UK, there are different kind of, I would say, societies and agencies and organizations which look at the curriculum that's being delivered in the universities, either technical curriculum or in the business schools or in other departments. And Royal Academy of Engineering works very closely looking at how we can improve the engineering education. Now, what you see here is a report which was actually published 2 years ago, but there's a lot has been changes, I think, in last few years. Certainly in the recent years, it has been also more about developing that infrastructure to deliver this digitally enhanced education. So a lot of institutions have made significant investment in terms of updating their classrooms, their capabilities, their IT systems to ensure that the student can actually really benefit from these technologies. But also, I think it was very much about how do we really work with the industries, because students, when they graduate from the universities, they need to find a job. So it is very important to understand what are the industrial requirements in terms of the skill set. And one way to actually achieve this is to work very closely with those industries. So there's a greater push in the UK, at least, and I think many other countries as well, to work very collaboratively with industries. And when we talk about working very collaboratively with industries, it's also about how we take their suggestions, their input into designing the curriculum that we are going to deliver to our students. So it's not simply about facilitating those projects and arranging those internships and placements, but also actually bringing those industry partners on board in terms of designing the curriculum. So to give you an example, in our university, we call this as a course connect. So what we do here is actually we bring industry professionals to sit together with the program leaders who are responsible for designing and developing the program. We take their input from the industries in terms of what they're looking for, because if we teach students something which actually there's no demand in the industry, then that's not going to benefit us as an institution. It's not going to benefit us for our students. Neither it's going to meet the expectation of the industry. So we take their feedback in terms of updating the curriculum on the regular basis, and also we bring them on in our lectures very regularly to take their insight in terms of what are the recent movements, what are recent growth trends in certain areas, to ensure that we can actually include that in our delivery to make our students enabled and capable to work in those industries as soon as they graduate. So there's a lot of initiatives that has happened in the UK. Same thing is happening in Germany. I think Germany is very well known for very much practice-oriented teaching style. So they believe more actually in doing than actually just teaching theories, for example. So there's a greater emphasis. It's not about that theories are not important. It is important, but it's also about practice. I think it's changing also in India as well, as you could see. Like India is not far behind, especially when it comes to the digital capabilities. I think India is also one of the leading countries in that domain. But certainly when we talk about its implementation across the whole country, that's a bit of challenge. And yes, many institutions are really capable of pulling this thing together. In fact, what we are doing, and in fact, I'm talking to you all, is a fantastic example of the virtual collaboration that we are having through this technology. So you could see that in many Indian universities are also adopting new and ways of delivering teaching, whether it's about the hands-on learning. So we have got plenty of institutions now offering, for example, 3D printing lab. They have got state-of-art research labs. They're updating with the new modern machines and equipment. They're mostly industry-specific programs where actually you work closely with the industries. You also actually bring them on board in terms of the teaching and educating our students. There's a lot of open door concept where actually you encourage students to go beyond the traditional way of rote learning that we used to have, that you have to be delivered exactly this lecture and you have to memorize if you really want to perform well. Now the shift, there's a big shift. Now we are focusing more on in terms of how we can develop your other capabilities, primarily the non-technical skills. So you might be really good at technical knowledge, but when you go in the industry, if you cannot talk very clearly, if you're not be very confident, if you're not good at writing, you will have significant challenges. So now there's a greater push in terms of developing those skills as well, together with the technical skills. And certainly pushing for innovation and entrepreneurship has also been in a big push back in India, like many other countries. So the question is what is the future of the work? So where we are going towards now, when we're talking about these technologies, we're talking about the developing trends in this domain. So if you talk about in terms of the skill set, like I mentioned, we're moving very much towards the Industry 4.0 domain. And now we're talking about how we can think about what actually is the requirement. So if you look at the people who, or maybe let's say talk about the students in the schools, for example, all the work what they're learning at the moment and all the jobs that exist right now, down the year, in 5 years, in 10 years, many of them will not exist because the job roles will change because of the changes that is happening in the outer world, and certainly the changes that Industry 4.0 is having on that. So it is quite important to really understand that we need to move fairly quickly in terms of updating our curriculum to understand how the whole industry is shifting in what direction. And that's why it is quite important, for example, what we have been watching in movies, for example, a few years ago. Now we could see that robots, artificial intelligence, they all are actually taking, a big role in our day-to-day lives, and primarily in the manufacturing sector is being used heavily, right? So it is quite important to really understand that the future workforce requirements will be very different than what we have now. Next slide, please. So the next slide, basically, I was just highlighting some of the reports that was published by the World Economic Forum, and I could see the changing trend in terms of what the whole globe is thinking about, what they're thinking to transition towards, and they do realize the benefit of understanding the changing work trend across the globe. Next slide, please. So what is Education 4.0? And I think this is what we have been talking about, right? So Peter Frisk, I think he defines education towards Industry 4.0 as the future of education, right? And I think it's quite important, when we're talking about the Industry 4.0, we have to take the full advantage of the opportunity that these modern technologies create. And we need a similar revolution very much that we had in the manufacturing sector, in the education sector. And that is not just to meet the needs of the industry, but also to ensure the best possible student experience. And often we actually forget the second part. We always focus on the curriculum, the core content that we need to, the offer. But how do we really improve the student experience? So when actually you come into our education system, how we can enhance your learning capabilities, right? And that certainly requires investment in the staff time and investment in the facilities and so on. So Education 4.0 basically aims to to prepare the next generation of the talent through the transformation of this education system, right? And there are different kind of initiatives, I think, that will drive the impact, for example, through different interventions. It could be about implementing new measurement mechanism for Industry 4.0 skill set. It could be about the mainstream technology enhanced education and learning experiences. It could be about empowering Education 4.0 workforce, and also about the setting the Education 4.0 country level standards and priorities. And all these countries who are actually on the trajectory of towards the Industry 4.0, India is one of them, and now pushing towards the greater reliance on these technologies to improve the curriculum, at the same time the student experience. Next slide, please. The next slide. Next slide, please. It basically gives you, like, what do you really understand in terms of education 4.0. And I gave you an example, like exactly the way that we are talking right now through this virtual platform. This is a fantastic example. So it's not limited, like perhaps not sure in your times, because I think you guys are now in a very much in a digital age. When I was studying my engineering almost nearly about 20 years ago, when I started my engineering study, we have to just stick to the classroom. I don't think even we had internet, perhaps only one computer across the whole institution at that point of time. So it was not possible to interact with foreign faculties, for example. If you want to learn what's happening in different world, it was very difficult to get that information. But now things are changing. Now we're using the power of these technologies to learn from anywhere and anytime we want. There's a plenty of courses that are available online, which you can access within as and when you want. You can pause it if you have got something else to do, and that shows the flexibility that you have got, right? It's also, I think, you've got more personalized learning depending upon your capabilities. So if some students are really good, so they can take more tough challenges. Those students who struggle, they can take some softer challenges. And this is something I think is I would say being more focused here in the UK education system, where they try to identify the different capabilities of the student, and they try to actually provide all the necessary support those who need it, right? And that actually in personalization, again, is a massive transformation of the system. Flexible delivery, I said, there's a lot of mentoring to develop that independent thinking and independent research, independent capabilities. It's also about more applied work. So very much student would engage in mostly project-based learning, because you learn more by doing than actually just simply sitting in the class and going through those theories. But also it gives a little bit onus on the student to have their own ownership in terms of what they want. And also the way we evaluate. So you would see, in past, certainly during our times, it was simply an examination to evaluate what we have learned in terms of the concepts, in terms of techniques. But now things are changing. And if you look at most of the Western world, they have a very mix of assessments. In fact, I would say in many places, examinations either has been completely eradicated, or it is a very small proportion of that assessment. So there has been more focus on trying to assess your learning in a different way. I think that certainly is changing with these new technologies. In terms of the impact that this technology is having, I think we're moving quicker on the slides there on screen. So I'm still on the one slide back. So if you can bring back to the previous slide. One thing that is changing is also in terms of the expectations from you as a student. So now we're talking about using these technologies, but the student also have this kind of expectation in terms of how do they deal with these technologies, right? And I think that expectation is very much driven from the job market. So if there is a uses of, for example, you're hearing quite a lot about the big data analytics, you're hearing a lot about the artificial intelligence, machine learning. So if I'm a student, I would like to learn these things because I know that this is where the future is going to be. This is exactly what the industry is looking for. So that sort of expectation is certainly quite obvious in this world. We're also talking about education being very personal. So, it very much depends upon how the technology or this data could be used to measure student, your performance, how the course could be customized according to the capabilities of the student. Internet of Things is certainly taking over. So we are actually having the sensors everywhere, especially also to facilitate the fantastic learning experience. All the modern classes are equipped with sensors for energy saving, for maintaining the good hygiene in the class, but also for the learning practices. Your assessments has been completely redesigned. So now many universities, in fact, are using the digital experiential learning. So they're actually using even the AI to design a new form of assessments. Intelligent and digital and physical states, and I think many universities who are actually now investing in those infrastructure are very much keeping in mind how do we really ensure that we provide the best experience to our students. And the previous slide was showing you in terms of the design procedure for engineering education, as you could see, and you may be familiar with some of the plan, do, check, and act tool. So very much like how this Industry 4.0 is going to influence your planning in terms of designing what is the recent trend in the industry. So working together with the industries to making changes in the curriculum, developing those curriculum, and continuously keeping and monitoring to ensure that it is up to date and actually it meets the requirement. So what are the different skill sets? So we cannot actually wait for 5 years to review our curriculum. We in fact have to look at on the yearly basis, on the bi-yearly basis, looking at the feedback that you can gain from the students who have recently graduated, as well as the industries, to see what has worked, what hasn't worked. And that has been a fundamental way of dealing things in Industry 4.0. And then acting. So if you know that this is exactly the requirement, how quickly we can facilitate those changes. Of course, that requires a massive investment in terms of training our existing staff, improving our infrastructure. But this is it's a cyclic process where actually you have to continuously go through that. In terms of the general competencies, I think the slides on the screen I see is moving quicker than I am moving. But I just want to touch upon some of the generic skills. I touched upon the virtual collaboration exactly the way that I'm talking to you all, but also about developing that resilience to deal with this sort of sudden changes that is happening in the external environment, the social intelligence, that is empathy of a person to relate with others so effectively and peacefully. And that is actually also very important, because it's not just about gaining those technical skill set, but it's also about having that understanding and being able to connect with what is happening in the external world. Certainly novel and adaptive thinking skills, so how you can actually improve your thinking skills to deal with this changing environment, changing business scenarios, through the market competition, how automation is changing everything. And then local cognition management, I think that's also quite important. That is to be able to manage all this information and obtain all the useful insight from it, instead of just finding the obstacles, and that normally we tend to do. Sense making, we're talking about, the using of the smart technologies, for example, right? So the smarter machines and devices are currently being developed. So as these machines actually, get useful and are becoming more skillful in doing our job, it is quite important from the engineering point of view that we have the skills at those tasks that actually machines are not very good at doing. So, okay, machines certainly can do many things, but there are certain aspects which they're not really good at. So we need to develop those sort of skills, innovation, for example, having that empathy, right? Ability to connect, with individuals and to understand this external environment fairly quickly. So, and of course, we cannot move into this new digital world if we do not have that transdisciplinary approach of looking at all different disciplines. I think this is, I would say, one of the major changes that is happening, that I remember during my times, it was very much about your discipline. Don't think about anything else. But the message that we are giving out to students now is very much, no, you need to think beyond that. Not just about your discipline, how your knowledge could actually benefit other disciplines. What you can learn from the other discipline that can actually benefit you. So I think that sort of transdisciplinary approach is actually one of the key things in this new world. Of course, you need to have the numeracy or the computational skills. That's quite important. Now, looking at the skill set, for example, and I think some of the previous slides, I think it's a different slide on screen now, but it actually just shows how things have changed. Back in 2015, there are different requirements in terms of what were the top 10 skills, right? And if you look at what is the top 10 skills right now, it is very different. Same applies in terms of the job roles. There are many job roles which were actually quite popular a few years ago. Now they don't exist. Now the new roles have been created, and there's a potentially the new roles will emerge down the line as well. So that is again showing that how quickly things are progressing, at least in 2 years, in 3 years time frame. Now there's a lot being said and written about what was the possible changes in terms of the new roles up to 2020, and that was very much based on on the transition towards the digital economy. But now, look at COVID. Nobody was expecting about COVID-19, and nobody was expecting the rate of, how quickly we will switch on to the online mode. I mean, in the UK, certainly we all were getting ready. I remember a few years ago that the future is going to be in online education. But everybody was thinking that perhaps 5 years, maybe 10 years, when we have to transition towards 100% online. But look at this, what has happened since this year. Now, almost, at least for last 6 months, we have been delivering everything virtually online. Now, it is much easier, I would say, certainly in the developed world, not because of the capabilities of the universities, but also that, what access the students have got. And that is a big challenge in countries like India and, some much more poorer countries like in Africa, where actually even there's no infrastructure. In India, still is progressing quite well. But again, if you look at every aspect, every region, it's not the same. So, of course, university maybe is capable of delivering online, but whether the student have got an access, whether they have got smartphones, whether they have got laptops, whether they have got a fantastic internet connection. So these are significant challenges that we still need to overcome if we really want to really harness the potential of these technologies. So again, I was showing, some of the slides which probably you have already seen, that, in terms of the skill-based education and how it is changing things fairly quickly. And in terms of this, in terms of the new skill-based education, I think is very much, there's a huge emphasis is on learning at those different skill sets, but actually makes you, well equipped with all the necessary skill set that you need to perform successfully in this, digital and global world. So previous slides were showing in terms of some example from the aerospace and supply chain and transport in terms of the technological adoption in those sectors. As you could see, like how quickly they're embracing these modern technologies. Then also it was showing in terms of, again, some of the emerging trends, what was there back in 2018, and how things are likely to change in going forward in 2022. So what do we need to do next? I think that's the key question. So we're talking about the 21st century skill set, and it's very important to have that sort of like a fundamental understanding of the different conceptual underpinnings. You need to also have a good set of competencies that you need to develop. And I think you will see that many industries and many organizations and many institutions are now focusing on developing those competencies. Because if we can't make students to think very creatively, if we can't make students think very innovatively, we can't make our students to work collaboratively, then actually we have failed in terms of what we are actually are known for. So it's quite important that we focus on developing those capabilities, and also like some of the character qualities. And I think that's quite important because, again, I said, it's not just about the technical knowledge that we need to gain. It's also we need to understand how do we survive in this world, right? How we can quickly adopt, how we can quickly, think in a creative way, how we can quickly resolve a problem using certainly our technical knowledge, which comes into our assistance, but also taking all the other avenues of support that you can. So this is quite important that, we need to move beyond the traditional way of doing things into a much more, in a more modern and holistic way. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the engineering knowledge now, of course, general definition is that you should be able to solve the complex problems, advance the current knowledge, and having a deep knowledge in technical engineering discipline and so on. But if you look at the recent development, for example, with this, IoT and the Industry 4.0, things are certainly getting much more complex, right? And in order to solve those complex problems and that to advance the current knowledge, we certainly need to think like, how do we prepare our engineering students to discover, to analyze, to conceptualize, to design, to develop and operate these complex systems, right? So the future engineering curricula that we talk about has to think and to keep this in mind when actually they're developing and putting more emphasis on the discipline-based learning. And it should also focus on much more, as I said in the beginning, it's more about the holistic view of product and system designs. They should be able to understand, the theory, how we can integrate the theory with the physical world and engineering sciences. how they can model the real life complex problems, and how they can simplify these problems and assumptions to make this happen. Certainly, there's a lot about specialization in particular areas is important. Certainly, yes, that is true. And also in the 21st century work, we talk about developing an ability, learning to think and learning to learn, and that has become much more critical, to be honest. And because of the changing information, it becomes much more important to shift our educational methods from cramming a large amount of expert knowledge into the heads to let our students learn how to acquire knowledge. So rather than actually taking a little bit of back foot and saying, okay, you need to develop those capabilities, you need to come forward and have that confidence to do really well in these things. And I said, like, in a good working knowledge and skill of the algorithm thinking, programming, statistics, data visualization, these things are important. But at the same time, the students should be able to come forward to actually embrace this, the new technologies, new ways of learning, and also think about how that will make a better person, to be honest. So having that creativity, innovation is very important. Having that technical mindset is very important, but having an open mindset is more important to embrace new things as you move forward in your career. Next slide, please. Okay, it's there. So the next thing is certainly about the critical thinking, and I think again it's quite important. And I would certainly say, especially in the UK system, that is the first thing that actually students tend to observe here. Because when most of the students join us for the master's program or undergraduate program, you will see that every lecturer is talking about the critical thinking. And students coming from India and Southeast Asia, including myself, when I was a student here, we struggle, what you're talking about, okay? Because this is not something that I have ever, heard mostly about, because we were very much, knowledge was being kind of passed on to us without giving much flexibility in terms of what we think and how do we realize this thing. So it certainly is about asking the right questions. And when we talk about the complex problems, it certainly could be overcome by making a critical and intelligent questions. And I think that's what, and there's a lot of encouragement here in the education system in the UK and in the West in terms of asking questions, rather than being very passive and just listening what somebody has to say. Normally it is encouraged to have a two-way dialogue. So it's not about that, lecturer knows everything. Sometimes we learn quite a lot from our students in terms of, what they want to have to learn, what new kind of thinking they have, what new ideas they have. And I think that is quite important, especially in engineering when we talk about, problem-solving domains. So engineers are known to solve problems, right? So when we talk about using these modern technologies, the recent connected, system environment, when we know that these connected system environment actually is creating more complexity, right? So certainly we need to think beyond our traditional ways of finding a solution. And that's what it requires, a bit of critical thinking. It requires innovation, as we will progress, and I will see in the upcoming slides. Can you move on to, okay, it's already there. And one thing I mentioned also about the interdisciplinary and holistic thinking, because it's quite important that, we need to think and learn from the other disciplines as well. And we shouldn't be very much narrowly focused on, okay, this is exactly what I need to do. That's fine. You need to have those kind of expertise and strength, but also at the same time, you also need to see how the knowledge could be learned from other disciplines, which certainly would benefit you in dealing with the complex problem that we are facing at this stage. Certainly, collaboration plays a very important role in that. And engineers not only collaborate, for example, in teams to solve a complex problem, but it's also actually about managing people, right? And that's why there's a fusion of that core technical skills and management skills is getting very important, okay? So when we talk about the imagination, creativity, and innovation, again, I think these are the attributes that one would expect to have. And from our side, and as an academics, trying to teach students, we try to ensure that this is what we want our students to develop. So they can imagine new solutions. They can be very creative in what they think and what they do, and they're also very innovative. And I think if you talk about critical thinking and creativity, we cannot be innovative until we have that. So you can see the importance of this, creativity and innovation. And education certainly policies when you think about how we can really improve this. And for that, it is very important that actually we enforce and we implement these sort of skill set in our delivery. Lifelong learning, again, not normally we think, and I think perhaps you all have experienced to this point. When we were in schools, we thought, okay, once we finish school, that's done. Then we are in college, then we are now in the universities and getting our technical degrees. But in the life, it is a very lifelong learning process. So the learning never stops. We learn every day, every second, with our experience, what we observe in the outer world. And I think this is something it is quite important to keep in mind. So when we come out of an education system thinking about the technical skill set, we think, okay, we know everything. And I remember, for example, when we were studying, we had to learn, for example, programming languages, just C, C++, and we thought, okay, that's the end of the world. And then now we talk about Java, we talk about all different programming languages. Every day there's a new development in that area. Now, of course, the fundamentals for many of these remain same, but still we need to learn new things, right? And if we are not really flexible in terms of that lifelong learning, then it's going to pose significant challenges. So it is very important, if we really want to prepare ourselves for the future, then we have to be ready to kind of embrace new learning throughout our life, throughout our experiences. And of course, we're trying to do that, at the university level as well. We're trying to kind of, provide that sort of environment where actually students can see and visualize their own learning trajectory, right? Now, competency-based education, I think that's, again, getting very, very important, I would say, across the world, not just only, I would say, in the Western world, but also in India. So it's very much, I think, developing those competencies. And now we talk about the competency-based education, but the key challenges that could differ from institution to institution. The general concept, for example, is demonstration of the mastery of a subject through a series of assessments, assignments, instead of following a prescribed set of courses. So there's a big emphasis here is in like how do we develop certain core key competencies. And if you look at, for example, the UK system, the first thing that the lecturers would do when it comes to designing a new course, a new curriculum, is to think about like what sort of competencies that we want to the students to develop if they're going through this program. So that is the first thinking that comes into mind before actually you can start thinking about the content of that program. So that is quite important that, and I think many universities have already, started imposing their own ways of doing this program to develop those competencies, because that's what I think is the requirement, and that's what the industry expectation for any graduates. So if we talk about the digital transformation, again, we have seen already this open education resources. We've got massive online open courses, many of you can access. So it's not limited to the knowledge that we were actually quite dependent to gain. In past was very much dependent where we are, so which institution we are studying. But right now, you have an access to plenty of courses all across the globe, right? If you want to do a short certification, a short course in Harvard, you can do that. If you want to learn a specific skill set, which is not part of your course and curriculum, still you can do that because you have got resources, you've got an access. And I think this is something we have to kind of, I would say, embrace in our daily life, especially, being engineers, right? Institutions sometimes have their own restrictions in terms of the approval of the curriculum. Sometimes it takes 2 years, 3 years, and that's the institutional process. And there's a very, very valid reason why it takes more time, right? But the industry is changing at much faster rate than actually we can switch from one, updating our course curriculum from right now to the modern one. But as a student, and that's why I said, in the digital world, a lot of ownership is also on us, very much on us, because we need to see, okay, what we need. If we really want to create our career in a particular domain, then I need to learn more. And now you don't have challenges in terms of having something that you do not have access where to look for. And that's why these technologies are coming, into place. If we talk about the open courses, there's plenty of them. And many of them actually available free of cost. There's no cost to take those courses. You can simply log in, create an account. They have designed certain, workshop and exercises. You just take it. There's a lot of online video lectures. And you can actually gain a lot of, new knowledge, and it can strengthen your knowledge base. And many students actually who are actually already doing this. So if you're not actually following that, I would say this is the time that you need to think about it. We also talk about the artificial intelligence and gamification. And again, gamification certainly has transformed the whole approach of learning completely, because you enjoy is very much playing games. For example, you also like simulations. Many universities are now using that because it helps you to apply your theoretical knowledge into practice. At the same time, the games have been proven by research that it helps you to learn quickly. So, many universities are already embracing these modern technologies and modern ways of teaching to ensure that, you have all the necessary skill set that you need to survive in this modern world. So just to finish off, like I said, you have probably seen my slide, that nobody will hire you because what you know. This is what was the kind of way of thinking in past. You will get hired because what you are able to do with your knowledge. And that's the key message that I want to deliver. And as I said last slide, you will see that I believe it is a time to re-envision and transform our engineering education system. So I will stop here, and I will be very happy to take any questions from you all. Thank you. Yes, off
Thank
to
you
you.
very much. Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And that was great. This event can be considered as an overview of an emerging situation, which is very helpful to explore how the education programs react to Industry 4.0 vision. It is worth highlighting that Industry 4.0 is about cyber physical systems and the current status of the education reactions that are dominated towards the cyber part. Thank you so very much for your wonderful presentation, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yes, sir. For the participants, I would like to mention that there is going to be question answer session where our keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Vikas Kumar, will be answering your questions. So please write down the questions, whatever you're feeling to ask.
Okay.
Well, in the chat box, I'm getting a few questions.
Yes, I think the first one is from Professor Tanmay Singham.
Yes,
I
sir.
think
Yes, yes, sir.
so.
That
He's
is
saying
from
the
our
industry situation is really very bad, and how this Industry 4.0 can help to revive the industries. I do
Yes.
agree. I think I wouldn't disagree that industries are at the very good situation at this stage. But certainly, if you look at the potential that Industry 4.0 can actually transform many industries, and one of the biggest challenges, I've been doing research in this area for some time, and of course, we can see the potential that these modern disruptive technologies have in terms of transforming our industries, our education system, and everything. The major barrier we have, first of all, is an understanding. The industries simply cannot improve by adopting these technologies where there's no one to actually deal with these technologies in terms of the skill set. The major challenges that many countries, in fact, I can certainly tell you from the UK perspective, because I've been here now almost 10 years, that industries actually struggle simply because if they want to recruit students who can actually work on AI, they can't find one. Now, I think in India, if we are saying the industry situation is very bad, I think we are just not simply utilizing it properly, because all the skill set, perhaps I think that we have in the Western world is actually coming from these developing nations like India, China, Turkey, and so on. So there is actually, I think a need for, I would say, creating that balance between the adoption of these technologies plus having that, development of those right skill set. Other challenges certainly that involves, because technology is not as cheap as one would expect. It comes at the cost. And the major, I think I would say, challenges is not for the large industries where actually they are financially quite sound and they can actually quickly embrace these technologies, is actually SMEs. And the SMEs and actually are, unfortunately, are the major backbone of any country. So, for example, in the UK, 90% of industries are SMEs. Now, these are the small and medium scale enterprises, right? They don't have really good financial backup. But what good thing is that the government here in the Western world have actually created a lot of ways how they can really work together with the universities to, facilitate the transition towards this digital economy. So there's a need for, I would say, from all directions. There needs to be improvement in the policy. There has to be some sort of support. There's also a role that we can play as a technical institution to develop those skills and expertise, and that can perhaps help us to deal with this problem. Okay, I've got another question from Madan. Hopefully, I answer your question, Professor Tanmay. There has been that manufacturing industries in India, particularly, we don't find any growth with the adoption of. Yes, we can, but again, I think it is down to also the policy side in terms of how government is supporting those initiatives. Because I said it's very challenging for industry to completely switch from the old ways of doing things into new ways, unless there is a good support from the government, and that is quite vital. And I think once we do that, we can. But also, I think if you look at from the flip side, in terms of the positive aspect, I think the new technologies have actually also created new business models and new businesses you can create from this. And many of them might not need significant amount of investment. Now, manufacturing is struggling in terms of from number of angles. For example, at the moment, all the the Western, I would say, the highly polluted industries are being transferred to India and China because the regulations are not that strict. And those countries actually are quite financially very sound, so they are very quickly able to transform and adopt these modern technologies into their provision. Now, we are also moving into that direction. Certainly there has been some move I could see from some of the initiatives of the government, like Make in India, and that will probably make it possible, but I think it's still a long way to go. But again, I said, as a technical institution, we can certainly play a major role in terms of facilitating this transition while working very closely with industries and providing our expertise to help them to transition towards this, Industry 4.0. Other question. Does that answer your question, Madan?
Yes, sir. I think that our delegates got their answers and they are very much satisfied with the answer, whatever you
Thank
provided
you.
us. Thank you so very much. I would like to request our participants, if you are having any kind of query, please write down in the chat box. Our keynote speaker, Professor Kumar, is going to answer you. So we're just waiting if any kind of questions are here.
I think I would also say, if there's some other burning questions which you cannot think of right now, but you still want me to answer them, feel free to drop me an email, and I'm very
Okay.
happy to answer your questions if there are, unless you ask me now, you've got time in 10 minutes to ask me those questions. But yes, don't think that after the talk you can't. I mean, you can. If there's certainly burning questions, especially for students, I've seen sometimes they're not really open to ask in front of everyone, but if there's a question which you want an answer to, please drop me an email, and I will be more than happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. So participants, you can drop your questions in the mail also. Like
Yeah.
if you're not feeling quite comfortable to ask question in front of everybody, so you can mail it also. Okay, sir. Thank you so very much. I would like to call upon stage Professor Dr. B.C. Swine, Principal of Trade, to please give your vote of thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good
We
afternoon.
are on the verge of this 2-hour international session that focused on an emerging trend, and that is engineering education toward Industry 4.0. I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks to
Thank
the
you.
keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Vikas Kumar, for gracing your important work and sharing with us your finding and opinions today. I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to our respected chairman of our college, Sri Jayant Kumar Chakravarti, Director Technical Sri Kajal Das, CEO Sir Sri Madan Sarkar, our Principal Professor Tanmay Singh, and other dignitaries for the perfect support and guidance that has extended to all of us at this event. Finally, a big thanks you
Thank you.
to our colleagues, participants, and students for their gracious presence. Thank you all for making this event successful with your
contribution. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you very much for everyone for listening, for your patience. And I said, like, it was a great experience, and thank you very much for Rajendranath College for inviting me for this keynote session.
Thank
And
you,
I
sir.
and I look
Thank you,
forward
sir.
to contributing in future as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we are at the end of our 2 hours live international session. Thank you, Sir Professor Dr. Brikas Kumar, for your quality time, and you have managed everything, and you gave us lots of information regarding the topic, and thank you so much, sir, for your
Thank
valuable time. Thank you.
thank you very much. Thank you, and I look forward to hear more questions from students later. So
Yeah,
thank you.
sure, sir. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.